Hello, everybody. It's Mark Britton here, the host of the Innovation Conference. Unfortunately, with the current circumstances, we were hoping to have this published on Tuesday, the 17th of March, and clearly circumstances for everybody has changed over the course of the week. What we're planning to do now is just take a slice of that innovation conference. One part that we were hoping to share with you was about best practice with using Microsoft Teams and thinking about collaboration and remote working, which of course is becoming hugely important for everybody at the moment, as many of us now are working from home. I have on this call, on this Teams call today, Crimson's Modern Workplace team. Allow me to introduce you to Kieran. Kieran, would you like to introduce the rest of the team and tell us what you're hoping to share with us today?
I will indeed. Thanks, Mark. So welcome to the Modern Workplace. We would like to take you on a tour of some of the new technology that's available to us in Office 365, how to maximize your investment that you've made in Microsoft Office licenses, and share with you some stories from working with some of our clients with this technology. So moving on, I'd like to introduce to you some of the speakers that you'll be hearing from today. So Matthew, would you like to go first?
Yes, thanks, Kieran. So yeah, my name is Matthew Rugrock. I'm a modern workplace consultant at Crimson. I've worked in the NHS and for the Treasury as well, in looking after SharePoint projects, Office 365 projects as well. Lots of interesting stories from those two organisations. And now I'm going to be earning some major dad points as well, because I believe this is going out on YouTube. My son now thinks I'm going to be a YouTuber. So yeah, major dad points there. Over to you, Caroline.
Hi everyone, my name's Caroline Lee. My background is original web development and then SharePoint. I've worked in SharePoint for far too many years to mention. More recently, I've been working as a Microsoft end user adoption specialist, and I've worked predominantly with Teams. I've done lots of Teams training around the world, and I'm probably one of the most enthusiastic people about Teams. So recent events with the massive increase in use of Teams has made my day. Back to you, Kieran.
Well, I can definitely vouch for your enthusiasm of Teams, Caroline. Well, one of the things I'm proudest of doing is one of the first projects that I did here at Crimson, which was to build a SharePoint app to manage to reduce bottlenecks in the introduction of new products for a large retailer. And it was the solution that we built was based on SharePoint on premise, and it was so successful that it outlived the longer term solution that was supposed to replace it, which cost a huge amount more, but outlived it by 10 years. So that was really quite a success story for SharePoint. So what we'd like to do today is to take you through what the modern workplace is. But first of all, I'd like to contrast that with, well, what is the classic workspace? Well, the classic workspace really has caused quite a few challenges to the way of working in teams. It's difficult to share information with each other and collaborate. If you're new to a project, it's very difficult to see the history of communication that's gone before your time. So if you do need to share information with people, you've got to forward through a string of email conversation, and you might miss something in that conversation thread. Similarly, people attach documents to emails, which means that they're working on a local offline copy rather than a master version of the document, and that generally means that somebody's left with the job of pulling that information together and creating a single version of the truth. VPNs also get in the way. VPNs don't work particularly well with mobile phones or tablets, basically, shadow IT starts to become the answer to some of these problems. So staff within the company keen to get their job done bypass normal company policy, and instead of using strategic IT, they will use alternatives such as Dropbox or other solutions that suit their needs. So the modern workplace really is an answer to some of those issues that we've been used to facing. So the modern workplace really leverages the Microsoft Office 365 ecosystem and helps us achieve greater collaboration. What we're trying to do within our team is help you as users of this software improve your productivity. We focus on these parts of the wheel that you see in front. So primarily, Teams is this hub which allows to bring in SharePoint for storing documents and collaborating on files together. And then we build custom apps using Power Apps and Power Automate, which is what used to be called Flow. So that allows us to build custom workflow scenarios to improve business processes. Power Apps is that forms capability. SharePoint provides the place to store the documents and create an intranet capability. But then Teams is now starting to become the hub that glues all of this together. So Matthew, Caroline and I are going to take you on a little journey of how we got to create the content for this this conference that we're talking about now. So first off, we asked ourselves, how best are we going to collaborate? Are we going to use faxes? Of course, we're not far outdated. Are we going to use WhatsApp? Well, clearly Teams is really the answer to all of this. And here on the screen, there is a SharePoint site. And at the bottom of that, there is a form that allows us to go and create a new team. So as I start typing in, I can see teams that exist. I don't want either of those, the insatiable configurator or the introspective conference. I want the innovation conference. So I can share all the content that I'm going to be generating and that my team are going to come up with, and we can share all of that together. So I create the new team. It shows me all of the existing teams and the new team that I've just generated. Fantastic. I can click through to that and open the team. So this is an example of a Power App that we think we would encourage you to either ask us to implement for you or generate something similar yourself, to have in place a process whereby your staff can easily request teams. It's really important to make sure that your environment doesn't become chaotic. And you've got teams and channels that you can see on the left hand side. We've got Innovation Conference 2020 automatically generated with 5 or 6 channels. It's based upon a template, and that's what the Power App does. It uses a template behind the scenes to generate the team along with a SharePoint site as well. So bringing it all together, there are important governance rules as well behind this that Caroline's going to talk about in a moment. But first, I think, Caroline, a team is not just a team. Is that a fair point to make?
Yes, if you want to bring up the next slide. One of the things with teams is I love to get everybody as enthusiastic as me about teams, but then everybody wants one and they want one for everything. And if you're not careful, you can end up with quite a mess of lots and lots and lots of teams, and nobody knows which team they should be using. They haven't got a naming convention. So when you create a team, you're not just creating that team, you are actually creating an Office 365 group. That means behind the scenes you're creating a shared planner, which is great, but you might not want that, a shared OneNote, a shared mailbox, a shared calendar, a shared point team site, and a grouping stream. And it might be that all it was 4 people needed the ability to have a group chat and to share some files. That would be rather an overkill if we were to do that. So you do need to have that governance in place and think about how you're going to do that. So if you want to bring up the next slide, please, Kieran. You'll see here I've done a slide that just starts the things you should think about for that governance. Outside of the governance, there's also Teams etiquette. which is something that we sometimes forget about, but that's something we can help you with too. Some advice about how you should use Teams. Should people wear a headset? Should you mute your microphone before you go in? When should you mention people? Should it be a channel mention or a team mention? All these things are about etiquette and the way you use it. Some of you may have seen in chat that there's an urgent notification. Do you really want people sending you using that so that they can notify you every 2 minutes for 20 minutes that they're trying to get your attention to ask you what your favourite brand of tea is? So we do need to think about how we organise these things. But then the governance itself. Some of the questions you need to think about. Who do we want to be able to create a team? Is it everyone? Are we going to have that free for all, or are we going to put a little bit of governance in there and the support desk? And the app that Kieran showed you, that is a nice way of doing that, because you can have that approval workflow on there and it'll go through quite quickly. What's the name that you're going to name your teams? Remember, you're getting a mailbox with the same name. So maybe you want to prefix it. If it's a project, maybe you're going to prefix it with project. You can also prefix it with AD entities. So you can put the entity there. How long are you going to retain the team for? Do you want a retention policy on it, or some sort of life cycle on every team that you create? Who's you going to communicate with? Is it teams within your teams? You may have several tenancies. So you may have tenancies in different jurisdictions that you need to think about. Have you got external guests? How are you going to manage those? If you do have guests, what are you sharing? Are you going to share between teams, or are you just going to share externally? How are you going to share? What about the fun stuff? We all love those Giphies. There's some great ones going about at the moment. However, is it appropriate for every single team that you do to be allowed to put Giphies in there? You can manage that. What about add-ins? Some people use things like Trello. We know there's lots and lots of third-party add-ins that we use. Are we going to allow those? Well, if it's something that you use and it's something that you're paying for, why not? But you can manage that too. Live events. This conference was meant to be a live event. Well, after it was going to be an in-person event, and it was on that bad day that we just won't mention. But do you really want to allow every user in your organisation to be able to set up a live event? We can have 10,000 people in a live event, quite a lot of people. What devices are we going to allow? The mobile app for Teams is brilliant. It's really good. But how are you going to manage that? Are you going to put some sort of policies for that? Again, the retention policies. How long we're going to keep data for? Something that we've done quite a lot of work with other people for, and we're pleased to talk to you about that. And what about templates? What channels are you going to have in each of those teams? So there's a lot to think about before you set this up. It's very tempting to just jump in, but I'd encourage you to try and get some sort of governance in there to start with. So if we go to the next slide, this will show you a clip of a meeting that we had when we were discussing the conference. So as usual, Matt's got a drink in his hand, so I'll challenge you to see as we go through this how many sips of gin Matt has. But as you can see, we were using Teams. It was late at night, but you can see we've got the captioning on there, so that was great for me because I was getting a bit tired, and so I could read what was being said to us. But we were in 3 different locations, and we wanted to talk about what we were going to do on the slides. So you can see here, I wanted the guys to tell me what drinks they wanted. So you can see we've just zoomed in to show the captioning that's on there. So this is the other thing about Teams now, it's all inclusive and all the accessibility works really well. Over there, while we were in the having the meeting, we'd got the chat open, so I was able to share the document with the guys that I wanted to fill in. You can see here, because I've shared that document, we can co-author it. So we're both typing at the same time, where one person's typing, the cell changes colour. Each one of us has a different colour, so you can see where they're typing and who is typing. Matt was on the Guinness instead of the gin. That makes a change. And then you can see at the top right here, you can see who is in the document at the same time as you. So as soon as you put a document into Teams, you've got that great collaboration available to you. So we found that really useful. So The next slide is going to show you about setting up a meeting. We can set meetings up in Outlook, but if you set up a meeting within Teams, you can actually assign it to a channel. By assigning it to the channel, you're keeping all the information together. This is perfect for your team meetings. If you have a weekly team meeting, how many times do you have an email entitled weekly meeting? And if you search for that, is it last week's meeting, next week's meeting, the one we had 3 weeks ago? By putting it in a channel, we can put all that information for that one meeting all together. So that's what we've done here. We've picked a channel and we're putting it into the general channel. When we send that invite, the invite goes into our Outlook calendar, but it's also there in Teams. It will also start a new conversation in our post about that meeting where we can join it. So here we've joined the meeting. We're going a little fast, but that's what we do. We're joining the meeting and we're going to start recording. Look at the options we've got here. When we start recording, everyone gets notified that the meeting is being recorded. We can still chat. So we've got that chat pane. We can still share documents. Think about it. If how many times you're in a meeting and you mention a URL of a website, everyone goes off to type it, but someone types it wrong and finds an interesting dancing penguin page, you've lost their attention for a while. Whereas if you put the link there, at least you know you're all looking at the same thing. So the chat's really useful to have there. We've got all these features. We've still got the reactions as well, so we can do the emojis to react to things. So there you can see we put in a website. When we hang up, let's have a look at the conversation. So you can see that where we set up the meeting, it tells us. Then we get an icon to tell us that the meeting has started. You can see all the conversation that happened during that meeting, and shortly the video will appear. The URL that I sent, so the web link, is also in that conversation. The recording will go into stream, so it'll render here shortly. Everyone that is in the team has access to that video by default because they're a member of the team. So if someone missed the meeting, they can come in, they can see click on the links and they can play that recording. And then after the meeting, we can still carry on and have a conversation about it. So I'd been taking notes. I could put a link into those notes here. You can see now that the video has popped up. Wouldn't it be great if all our meetings were just 2 minutes, 11 seconds? Sadly, ours was a lot longer than that. So we were quite tired afterwards. That was our messy meeting.
Thanks for that, Caroline. It's really good. And I think one of the takeaways there is try and get into a really good habit of starting to use this technology and maximize its potential with all the different capabilities as soon as possible, so that you get out of the old way of the old habits of working with email and you start to use the chat in Teams for internal conversations. It's a great way of keeping that relevant, similar content together in an organized way. So one of the things that I particularly like about Teams is Planner. So you might have remembered me saying right at the beginning where we used that Power App to create a request for a team that then got approved by somebody within IT. It used a template. And that template within it had a planner, and our planner is another Microsoft Office module, which is probably in your license if you've got an E3 license. It's part of that suite, and it's a really handy tool for keeping track of tasks. And just on the screen here, you can see a simple way of keeping track of different tasks for this particular conference that we were working towards. Can create different buckets of tasks and put start and finish dates so that people get reminded. And the other thing is that you can report on that as well. So here we've got a simple chart describing how many tasks are in progress, the priority of them, and who's assigned to which ones. And on the right hand side, you can see the detail of those tasks as well. But then also we can filter. So I would like to filter and see what tasks Caroline has, and let's just pull her up. And then
far too many.
But look, you've done so many of them already, Caroline. Superb. So moving on, the meeting that Caroline showed you was in the evening, and we were making really good progress, but we wanted some feedback on how things were going on some of our content. So I contacted our esteemed colleague Nathan Smith, who heads up our sales department. Nathan here is catching 40 winks in an off-site meeting. It's the evening, but sadly he didn't have something called quiet hours turned on, so his phone rang when I called him on Teams. And Caroline, you're going to take us through how he could have avoided that.
Yep. And so if we just show the next slide, this is showing you what quiet hours you can do. So I'm going to say I love it because, you know, it's Teams, but I do love the mobile app for Teams. It really is good, but it can disturb me at night time when I don't want to be at work or at the weekend. And Microsoft are really putting in a lot of work to help us with our well-being and to look after us now. It's, you know, we don't want to be working 24/7. So what they've done is on the app, you can go into the notifications area and you can turn on your quiet hours. And what quiet hours is, you can decide what notifications you're going to get and when. So here you can see that the quiet hours are set from 7 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning. I won't get notifications. It doesn't mean that I can't go into Teams and see things. It will still be in my activity thread. It just means I won't get that noise and the banner pop up. I can also choose quiet days. Now I've chosen here Sunday and Saturday, but now with Agile working, there are people that work many different work patterns. So if you don't work on a Wednesday, you can choose Wednesday as your quiet day. So if you don't want to be bothered like Nathan when he was just trying to have a little sleep, then I would advise you to turn on your quiet hours.
Thank you, Caroline. So on the same thread, you might find that some of your colleagues speak a different language. So in this instance, I've written something in German. Ich benutze gerne Teams, wenn ich weiß, dass ich Kontrolle habe. And I can use Teams to translate that into English. So that translates to, I like to use Teams when I know I'm in control. So as Caroline mentioned, Microsoft are really improving the technology here to allow us to be in control and to help us too if we've got some issues with trying to see things clearly on the screen. So here is Immersive Reader, and I prefer to see white on black rather than black on white. And we can translate the text from that message as well into Polish. So there's a lot of things here to help us if we know that they exist. So moving swiftly onwards, as we were preparing for this conference, a notice came through from Mark saying that the innovation conference was going to be postponed due to the coronavirus. It wouldn't take place at the Vox Conference Centre at the NEC. It was going to take place in a virtual capacity. And as a consequence, Matthew found some interesting apps. So over to you, Matthew.
Thanks, Kieran. So yeah, as you mentioned, we've been on quite a journey in preparing the material for the presentation for today. And from the initial brainstorming sessions to the messy meeting that we had last week, we've been using Teams and Office 365 to try and prepare all that material. And then, as you said, the conference has had the announcement was made, so we really had to rethink about how we were going to prepare that material and what our session might look like to the point where we're at today. And obviously, Teams is one of the features that we've used to do that, but Microsoft are also rolling out lots of products and features that are helping organizations with this, because communication is so vital at the moment. So if you go on to the next slide. This is actually a demonstration of a video of an application that Microsoft have created. It's been built in Power Apps, and it's a crisis communication application that helps organizations with that communication throughout this process. So all employees can make requests and they can access emergency contact information, company news, and really useful information that can help them throughout this process. And also, there's going to be lots of working from home and from out of office locations, so employees can also share their status using this application. So again, using the application, you can click working from home, select the dates you're going to be working from your home or another location. And when that's submitted, it goes away and does a number of things. You can notify your team. It can set an out of office message for your email as well. And all of that information can be published into SharePoint or a Power BI dashboard. So management or HR or IT can access it and see where people might be working and offer support for those people as well.
So I think that's a really good example, Matthew, of how people have used the technology very rapidly to help with a very quickly changing situation. So behind the scenes, what technology does this use?
So behind the scenes, if you go on to the next slide, there's a good overview. Well, I believe the next slide is a web part. Yep. So again, this is something that Microsoft have produced. It's showing live information. Obviously, this is related to coronavirus, but a similar web part could be used to show live company information, manufacturing data, or sales information. This is the type of thing that could be embedded in a SharePoint portal or in Teams. And the next slide shows how that Power App was built. And again, any device, it could be used on a mobile device as well. The app itself was built in Power Apps. The information that pulls through from it is stored within SharePoint, and the notifications and the automated processes that go on in the background are all created in Power Automate. Obviously, people within an organization can use Teams to coordinate the response. And then the information that's generated from it, from sharing status, that can be published through dashboards and reports in Power BI as well. The app itself was created by Microsoft, and it's been published as template, so any organization as well could rapidly deploy this into their Office 365 tenancy. I think overall it shows that for any situation, whether it's the one that we're in at the moment, crisis with climate change, things that we've had in the past, such as GDPR or Brexit, the technology is there to support organizations and can be quite empowering. We're into day 4 now of working from home, and people have had to adjust very quickly to the way that they're working, and people will probably have seen that technology has really supported that change.
Superb, and I like the way here you've got a Power BI graph in the background as well, so allowing people to see a different way of viewing that data. And indeed, Power BI is something that we like to use when we deploy technology across organizations, large or small, but particularly useful when you're deploying large organizations across multiple teams, so you can see the adoption of hopefully the successful adoption of what you're rolling out and deploying to users across the business. So on this graph here, this is a real graph that was taken at the end of last year. It covers several months from March through to November, and it shows the yellow, red and blue lines representing Teams, SharePoint and OneDrive on a general upward trend, and at the same time Skype for Business on a general downward trend. So this is a project that we did for a large client with offices all over Northern Europe. We were training SharePoint and Teams to their users, having really worked tightly with one of their key business areas that we used to decide what that template was going to look like, which hopefully we could use throughout the business. So one of the things that we'd strongly suggest is work with a core group of people who can see the value of this technology, work with them closely to understand some of the pitfalls, but also some of the benefits of using this, and tailor your training around that, tailor your governance and use their input. because doing that really helps drive adoption. So as I said, this is replacing Skype for Business. A lot of the stuff that Teams does replaces Skype for Business. Microsoft are deprecating that as a technology, but Teams is far much more than that as well. You can, if you want, force Skype for Business and turn that off. That wasn't happening in this organization. This is a genuine adoption, people seeing the benefits of Teams here over Skype. So it's a really nice thing to see. So that's using Power BI there to monitor the progress of your strategy and rollout. One of the things that we've done a lot of work on is planning the adoption and rollout. A lot of this stuff around governance and piloting is still relevant, even if you've had to rapidly deploy Teams in a short space of time. What I would encourage you to do is to revisit some of the settings behind Teams, look at those governance settings. If you understand them, fantastic, go and set them up. Otherwise, please ask us for advice. We're more than happy to share our knowledge with you and to share some of the plans and planning that we've done in the past. There's plenty of training and adoption material that exists online, both by Microsoft and other vendors like ourselves. Do share that with your colleagues. But we found that customized and personalized training material that's tailored towards your working environment with the systems and the channels and the templates that you've created work better, and people tune into those and take in the training far better. One of the things that we advocate as well is using Stream to host any meetings and training courses. So when you record a meeting, such as we're doing now, this will be available in Teams, in Stream, just like Caroline showed earlier. And here on screen, you can see a channel that we created with a whole bunch of short videos that we put online in Stream for our users. So to wrap things up, how can Crimson help? Well, we can help on that training and adoption, the governance, as I mentioned, but also around security and compliance. We've been doing a lot of work with organizations about personally identifiable information, using the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center to help manage that personally identifiable information, both producing reports and also trying to label information that's been saved in particular folders automatically, so that you can report on it in future and also put a retention period on it so that that information can either be archived or deleted. Technology, there's some very interesting settings in the background. If you have a look in Azure Active Directory, if you're a large organization and you've got multiple Office 365 tenants, you might be in a situation where you're struggling to share information between those tenants. Go and have a look in Azure Active Directory, go and have a look at connected organizations. That's something that we've been working with some of our clients, helping them to connect up some of their different tenancies to share information across their groups. So Mark, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, team. I think that's a really comprehensive introduction to Microsoft Teams, and of course, so over the last few days, we're all having to change our habits and start to make the most of these tools. From what I understand, Microsoft are offering a version of Teams for free at the moment. Can you explain a little bit about what people will get if they sign up for the free version, and what potentially they're missing out on with some of the additional features that maybe we've seen today already?
Yeah, I can do that one. It is very much like the free Skype version, so you'll get the chat, the instant message, and you can have turn that into a voice call or a video call. You won't, of course, have behind the scenes the Outlook mailbox or the OneDrive area or the SharePoint area. So it does mean that the working on the documents you won't have, and you won't be able to schedule meetings in advance. But if it does work for the other way, So if you have a license, you've got a 365 license, you can schedule meetings with people who don't have 365 licenses. They don't have to put that free version on. They can just use the browser version. So yeah, the other thing that people are not always aware of is if you have got somebody outside of your organization who is also on Teams, you can IM them, so you can use chat for that. So it is the all-round communication tool now.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I mean, the big topic that we were going to talk about at the innovation conference is some of I suppose some of the barriers to remote working. And you've already touched on well-being and mental health, thinking about setting those quiet hours. I think one particular challenge that we've seen in some of the research is people actually overworking when they're working from home. And I think setting those barriers with some of those settings that you mentioned earlier is good. I'd just like to touch on another big challenge with remote working, and that's actually loneliness. And given the situation we find ourselves in at the minute, we're likely to be working from home for quite long periods of time. Any thoughts on that, and maybe some of the things that you're seeing Crimson doing at the moment to sort of overcome some of that?
So, Mark, one of the things that we've done at Crimson is to create we have an organizational wide channel in Teams where the whole of the company can add chats, messages, upload photos, etc. People don't have to be invited into that team. They're part of it as a result of having an account. And within that team, we set up a couple of channels. One is working from home, so people can share their stories of how perhaps they're finding it difficult, or perhaps they're enjoying the lack of a commute, like many of us. We certainly don't miss that. But also we've got channels in there to share information about things that might not be work related. Matt, is there anything else you'd like to comment on in regards of just the change to working from home?
Yeah, I guess it's going to be a big adjustment for a lot of people, whether that's just working in a non-office environment and having that kind of mental shift of working in a home location but still having to do work. I couldn't turn my camera around during that presentation, but actually my son just came back from school and peeked his head in the room to see what was going on. So I think with the schools closing, that's something else that people are going to have to try and adjust to, and potentially working in different working patterns or working schedules. While the technology supports that, it does again make that problem of switching off from work more difficult. When does your work day end, or when even does it start, and how does it fit around your home schedules as well? So having things like quiet hours, but at least having the flexibility to work with your technology and your colleagues, and having that synchronous and asynchronous communication, whether it's in channels or in chat, can really help as well.
And I think actually, yeah, just talking about the recording earlier, I think there's a brilliant example where some people might now have to work some unusual hours because they've got childcare, but actually if they can't make a meeting, we're able to record it within that channel and they can pick that up a little bit later.
For me, I'm one of those sad, lonely people, but so are a lot of my friends. A lot of us live alone, and I've worked at home a lot. I don't like working at home every day. I like to go in the office for company. Some of my friends are really struggling with it. It's just that sort of thing. So I think it's important to set those regular things. If you normally meet for lunch, then you should meet online and have that chat. And I think sending an email is just never the same as actually speaking to someone face to face. So turn on the camera and do that. And Crimson have been doing some really great stuff this week, getting us all together each day. And Mark, I did wonder whether he'd been drinking actually when he said he set the plan. But Matt sent a game for meeting bingo, which is quite good fun. But Mark's organised all sorts of activities for us next week to do online. I'm particularly looking forward to Crimson Through the Keyhole.
Yeah, there's some really really fun ideas at the moment that we're pulling together, and I think you're quite right, Caroline. It's really important. And we've stressed this within Crimson to switch on your camera and get used to having that fuller interaction rather than a disconnected voice, and that just adds to the experience. So I suppose it's probably worth us wrapping it up there. As you can see on the screen, we are offering a remote readiness health check. Things are moving very quickly, and a lot of people are already having to move into the home working environment now. We are available, and we can review your home working procedures, take a health check of your IT environment, and just provide further guidance in addition to what we've shared today. If you are interested in arranging a call, in the first instance, if you email Nathan, his email address is on the screen at the moment. In addition to that, we are sharing some content on our blog around making the best use of Teams. But as Kieran mentioned earlier, Microsoft and a couple of other places already have some excellent resources that you can refer to just to get yourselves up and running quickly. This is one part of the conference, and one of the other areas that we were hoping to share, and we're still planning it for next week, is the panel discussion. So look out for that over the coming few days. We'll be bringing together some of the speakers from the original conference to look more widely at some of the challenges and learnings now that we're having from running a remote workforce. And I think ultimately, this is going to change how we work forever, I believe. Many of us are getting really good at using this technology now, but what I think we'll very quickly find is that there still needs to be a huge amount of governance around this technology to get the most out of it, and I think that's where we can help. So I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much to the Modern Workplace team. I know you're all extremely busy at the moment helping our clients make this huge adjustment. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you all very soon. Stay safe.